Hi, I'm Colin, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about ransomware. And ransomware, at its core, is a type of malware that seeks to block access to a user's files or directories or other sort of personal data until they pay a ransom to some entity. So to give you a basic idea of how ransomware works, the first step is the attacker tries to infect the victim. In this case, we're looking at an email that has an invoice file and a view your bill online link. And either of those things could lead the user to a potential ransomware file, which is going to be downloaded on their computer. And then the file usually automatically executes itself. And so once the file is on the user's hard drive, it's going to execute its code. And it may do a number of things. It may lock the entire operating system. It may encrypt files on the user's hard drive. But its ultimate goal is to make the operating system inaccessible to the user. And it usually displays some sort of message like we have here. So you can pause here and take a look at this, but this is essentially an example of a ransom note. So, usually after the file locks the complete system or encrypts files, it'll display a message of some sort, like the one we have here, that's going to, try to inform the user that their files and their hard drive are going to be permanently inaccessible to them unless they pay a ransom to a specific entity. It'll usually give instructions on how to pay the ransom. And as you see here, another strategy is hackers will include a time limit, right? So here we have like a time limit of 2 days and 23 hours. So, hackers are trying to play on this sense of urgency and fear that, people develop when they see this message on their computer. And so, once a user ends up, paying the entity, which, may be an electronic payment of USD, or especially more in recent years, it may be a cryptocurrency transaction. The program will at least claim to give people a decryption key once they provide that payment. And, in theory, the decryption key would, decrypt the files on a user's drive, or unlock the system for the user. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes people will pay up and receive nothing, and have to take their computer into a third party to get it unlocked. And so that's the basic progression of how a ransomware attack plays out. Um, and if you think about it, you can see why this type of attack is potentially very effective for attackers. The first thing is extortion. There is a direct line of profit in a ransomware attack between the victim and the perpetrator, given that the program, almost always directs the user to pay a specific amount to a specific entity. And so, it's a sort of, it could be a way of making quick cash for an attacker. Um, and in some cases, and we'll look at the history section next, but in some cases, high level organizations have been targeted by ransomware attacks, and in those cases, very high dollar amounts can be at stake. Um, Secondly, the attacks, play on this very human sense of fear and urgency. When someone receives a ransomware file, they have this deadline in front of them, and their files are very, very important and potentially very personal and intimate to them. And so they're gonna have this sense of urgency, and maybe not think rationally about what they should do, but instead go ahead and pay the amount to try to get a quick solution. The other advantages, which are more prevalent in the modern day, and we'll talk about this a little more later, is one, attackers can use cryptocurrencies in their transactions, which are completely anonymous, and which a lot of internet users own at this point. They've become very ubiquitous in our society. And finally, these attacks can be very easy for attackers to pursue. We'll talk a little bit about ransomware as a service later, but essentially there are more and more avenues for attackers to pursue these attacks without getting themselves tangled up in a lot of technological maintaining and operating. So I wanted to go over some of the basic history of ransomware. And that history is going to start in 1999. The AIDS malware virus is considered the first modern ransomware attack. And it's kind of different than the ransomware of the years and decades that would follow because rather than being spread on the World Wide Web, which was not ubiquitous then as it is today, it was spread through infected floppy disks instead that were labeled with titles like AIDS information or how to protect yourself from the AIDS epidemic. Obviously, trying to capitalize on the timely issue of the AIDS epidemic in people's minds. People had this sense of urgency, about protecting themselves from AIDS and the people around them. And so a lot of people fell for this attack. And what the attack entailed was the user would stick the floppy disk in their computer, and upon executing its program, the floppy disk would encrypt all the files and directories, essentially making the computer unusable for a period. And it would ask the user to send $189 to a random PO box in Panama in order to unencrypt the files on their computer. And given the relatively low money amount, it wouldn't be a super lucrative attack. But what it did do was it brought ransomware to the attention of antivirus companies and tech companies, and to some extent the media, who would begin to, try to raise awareness about ransomware, but also create tools to try to combat ransomware. So over the following decades, after the AIDS malware case, the internet would obviously grow exponentially in terms of usage and popularity. And with that, the mediums for ransomware would change. Instead of using floppy disks like in 1989, ransomware attackers would begin to use email as one of their prime mediums of attack. They would send, harmless looking emails with malicious file attachments or malicious links that would lead, users to a downloadable file that would, then execute a ransomware attack on their hard drive. And one of the most notable cases of this was the CryptoLocker attack in 2013. So what the CryptoLocker attack entailed was the user would receive a fairly innocuous looking email in their inbox that appeared to be from a legitimate company, and that it would have a file attached to it that had a PDF icon on it, and so the user would think they were downloading a PDF, but really it was an exe file that had just used the PDF icon. And Windows by default does not include the file extension name, when one is downloading a file from an email like that. So people thought they were downloading PDFs, but really it was an executable file that would open and run, and it would similarly encrypt people's drives. And it would demand $400 USD or euro from people in order to get a pass key to decrypt their files. And people also had the option of paying in Bitcoin, which was, relatively in its early stages in 2013, but was still being used on the internet, especially, on the deep web, where there were some illicit transactions being had there. And the media took this seriously, and the U.S. government took this seriously too. The Department of Justice actually issued some indictments for the Russian hacker that was suspected to be behind CryptoLocker. But the use of crypto in that case was really a preview for how ransomware would evolve into the next years and decades. Today as we see it, Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies have really risen in usage and popularity, and a lot more people own, at least some coins and some of these currencies. And given the anonymity of cryptocurrency exchange, coins are exchanged from one wallet to another online, both of which are completely anonymous and can't be traced, say, by any governmental entity. This is a really good opportunity for ransomware hackers to trick people into sending them cryptocurrency online that's essentially untraceable. The other piece of history that leads us into the modern day is the 2015 Tox attack, which is notable for being one of the first instances of ransomware as a service being used, or RAAS. And you might be able to relate to this if you know about what software as a service is. And what software as a service is a business model where software is licensed from a company that centrally hosts the software and maintains it and produces it. And businesses and individuals can pay for subscriptions of that software for use in their activities. So ransomware as a service can sort of be seen as a criminal variation of that. Um, so the ransomware operator will sell the software to affiliates, and it might be a monthly subscription or a one-time fee, or there might be some sort of profit sharing agreement between the two entities. So we can see, with ransomware as a service that, attackers are really starting to, utilize economic principles from, that are used widely in other aspects of the economy for cyber attacks. And, it's scary. And I guess, in the following decades, we'll have to see how ransomware continues to evolve. But, trying to leave things on a helpful note, the U.S. government is taking ransomware seriously. In 2022, they seized a couple of servers that were run by Hive, which was one of the biggest ransomware as a service operators. And so the Hive example in 2022 was a case of the U.S. government having a effective response to ransomware as a service. But in a lot of these cases, it's hard for the government to identify the source of the crime. There are a lot of layers of separation in between the hacker who is developing and maintaining maybe the ransomware attack, and the distributor who is sending out ransomware, and the user who is then becoming a victim to ransomware. And identifying all those steps of separation can be hard for the government. And so we'll see how their response continues to evolve. But there also has to be a element of public awareness response. As with other common scams like phishing, we've seen at least some efforts to get people educated about it. Ransomware as a service, and especially if it becomes more ubiquitous in society, there's going to have to be large scale public awareness campaigns about this.